member, as a GCMA member, to talk about your situation rather than employment law. We cover all of mainland UK and Northern Ireland. There's a book. Most of you, all of you, should have a copy of the book. If you don't, it's on Amazon. Employment Law for Private Member Golf Clubs. Not a lecturing book, an horror story book where you go, I would never do that, and then you turn the page and you go, oh, I should probably ring them. We have a team here. You see Nadia and Kathy there. Catherine's on maternity, and we actually have 2 new people who've started in the last couple of months, so we will be doing a new photo. And we have 299 clients on retaining, because we also do private sector. So I have a bet on at the moment with Kathy that I need to get over 300 by the end of the month. So after this, I'll be doing some phone calls. But what we're going to do today is, first of all, find out how much you know. So those of you who've seen my presentations before know that it's a Kahoot. That I love my Kahoots. So let me go on to Kahoot. What you will need to do is, with your phone, scan the QR code. And like I said, if you put your name in with initial for your surname, then we have a chance of finding out who is actually there. Is everybody able to do that? Yes, they are. That's good. So it's only 5 questions today because we've got a lot to cover, but it is but I thought it's always fun. It's always fun. The thing to remember with Kahoot is that it's not just the correctness of the answer, it's the speed of the answer as well. So that's what's going to get you the question. So if you think you know it, I would just go for the answer, and then you can worry about whether it's right afterwards. And there are some very nice chocolates up for grabs. Okay, so I'm going to do start. Okay. This is a special quiz for the GCMA webinar. Is the question true or false? The trial period or probationary period can be any length you want it to be. True or false? So you usually have 20 seconds. When the time's up or when everybody's answered, then it will stop and we will see the right answer. Okay, now it's true to a point and it's false to a point. The probationary period is an artificial construct that we as employers have made. It has no basis at the moment in employment law. So it could be 1 month, it could potentially be 1 year and 11.5 months. Normally it's 3 to 6 months, okay? But there is no legal definition of how long it needs to be, okay? So Sean C up the top. That's good. We'll have to work out who that is afterwards. Maybe go to Gareth. See, if you lose a discrimination case at tribunal, how much is the maximum that you would have to pay? 10,000, 1 million, unlimited, or 1 year's pay? Those of you who are our clients, I expect you to know this because I'm sure we will have had this conversation many, many times. It is that I'm really impressed, everybody. I'm very good. I feel like 12 years of doing education sessions has paid off because we've got unlimited. That's fantastic. So this is why we're also worried about discrimination cases, and that includes sexual discrimination, sexual harassment cases, because it is an unlimited amount that could be awarded against you. Okay. Sarah's moved up. Well done. Number 3. Which employees qualify for statutory sick pay? If you earn over £123 per week on average, if they're on a permanent contract, that they work at least 6 hours a week, or that they have more than 26 weeks service. What is the answer to that one? You have to earn more than the lower earnings level on average, and at the moment it's averaged over 8 weeks. So if they haven't worked more than 8 weeks, they wouldn't qualify for statutory sick pay, okay? E. McDermott. You see, I was going EMC. I'm like, gosh, that's very STEM for a GCMA session, but no, it's not EMC. E equals MC. Right, doing well. Okay, number 4, true or false? Employees with less than 2 years service can just be fired. Yes or no? Preferably not by post-it note, but you know, people have done that before. Almost all questions, all answers in. It is true, although I can almost see Nadia's face. Depending on the circumstances, do they have any protected characteristics? Now, we're not going to go through discrimination and protected characteristics today. That would be a different training. But if they have a protected characteristic, and most people have at least one, then you need to make sure that you can prove it has nothing to do with that protected characteristic, because if they do take you to a tribunal, it's going to be, like I said, an unlimited award against you if you lose, obviously, not if you win. So you can just say to them, Caroline, it's not working out, off you go, bye-bye. Pay them their notice, they go, as long as it's not because I'm female, pregnant, gay, whatever it is, okay? So E. McDermott still doing very well. Good. And the last one, who is entitled to bereavement leave? Employees with 26 weeks service, all staff from day one, employees earning over the lower earnings level, or parents of children under the age of 18. Okay, that's interesting. So you've all pretty much jumped the gun, because this is something the government is planning to bring in. At the moment, the only paid bereavement leave is for parents of children under the age of 18, and they have 2 weeks, the right to 2 weeks. There isn't any other paid bereavement leave as a legal entitlement for anybody else other than those parents. Okay. So who's going to be top of the list? And Cassie will, oh, Trevor, well done. Excellent. MG Robbo, well done, MG Robbo. And then the top one, E. McDermott. So if you send a message so that Cassie knows who you are, that will be great, and we'll send you some chocolates. Okay. Now, I wanted to do that because it is actually quite important to know where we are, to know how much of a change the legal situation is going to be going forward. Okay. So, because if I say, well, it's going to be this for bereavement leave, you're like, well, I don't know what it is now. So how much of a change is that? So going through that. So you should see the screen again. Oops. Okay. So this is the Employment Rights Bill that's coming in 2026-ish. It might be October next year. It might be April 2026. It's not going to be this year. The only one that is a little bit up in the air for 2025 is the minimum wage. But again, we don't have any information on that. So at risk. And Nadia, if you jump in, if I miss anything, unfair dismissal. So at the moment, all employees are unprotected. They're not protected. They're not protected for their first 2 years of continuous service. So like I said, under 2 years service, you can say, Caroline, it's not working out. Here's your notice, off you go. Okay. Over 2 years, we always have to use either disciplinaries, restructuring, or a settlement agreement to part company. What the change is in the new bill is that they are going to remove that. So you have protection from day one from unfair dismissal, which would mean, and the details have yet to be worked out, but it would in effect mean that from day one, if you want to get rid of somebody, you would have to do full disciplinary process, restructuring, or a settlement agreement. Now, they are negotiating with the employers, organizations, about putting in a probationary period of 6 months. It's more likely, the rumors are it's more likely to be 9 months, so that in 9 months, you can have the first 9 months, you have an expedited way of parting company. We don't know what that means, expedited. We don't know whether it's going to stay the same as it is now. It's just not working out, bye-bye. Or whether it's just you have to do one disciplinary, or what the situation is, but that is going to be the biggest change. So what you need to start doing now is making sure that within your current probationary period, you have a rigorous feedback loop, that you have weekly meetings scheduled in with all new staff proactively, not waiting until there's an issue, but having them in. So if it's 3 months, every week you say, right, how was this week? What went well? What didn't go well? What do you need training on? All of those things, so that well before the end of the probationary period, the people, the managers know whether somebody is working out or not. Okay. And you need to then take action and part company. And that needs to become the new habit in golf clubs, that we are absolutely using the probationary period to see if anybody is any good. We've always had the problem that people come to us at 2 years and 1 month and say, they're not very good, can I get rid of them? It's like, well, how long have they not been good for? Well, about 2 years and 1 month. Well, why did you keep them then? You need to part company quickly with people who are not any good, okay? But unfair dismissal is going to be the biggest change, because that's unlikely to be before April 2026. The 0 hours and guaranteed hours. Now, they were originally talking about scrapping exploitative 0 hours contracts. They're not really talking about scrapping 0 hours now. It has been toned down, but they are adamant about giving guaranteed hours. So if you have 0 hours staff who are working the same number of hours every week, they can, after 12 weeks of working for you, ask for guaranteed hours every week. Now, this is not going to affect seasonal workers so much. It's going to be the employees you have, and quite a lot of clubs do have them, who've been with you actually for years, and although they've got a 0 hours contract, they've got into the habit of only working 20 hours a week, and they tend to do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, that type of thing. Those are the people who might ask for guaranteed hours. You would have to give them that contract, which is in effect a part-time contract. And then if you ever gave notice, you would have to pay them that notice period and those hours. Okay. I'm going to say, we've been saying through custom and practice, they are part-time workers anyway. I don't think it's a big change there, but just be aware it's not necessarily the seasonal workers that are a problem. It is the ones who've been with you for years. But you do, again, need to get rid of the continuous service people. So you need to 0 hours. If they can't start with you in June, they're with you through the summer, they go back to uni, you send them their P45, say thank you for your support, see you at Christmas. You keep that continuous service down low, okay? They are changing a lot of rights to day one rights. Statutory sick pay, SSP, is going to be a day one right, so that you can have it from day one, no matter how much you earn. Now, again, they are working out the details of how they're going to split it down pro rata to actually allow for the fact that somebody might only be doing 10 hours a week, or even less, 6 hours a week. So they shouldn't then get to £123 a week. That's the bit we're looking for, but you will be paying SSP from day one. And as usual, as it has been for the past 10 years, you cannot get that money back from the government. Paternity leave is going to be a day one right. It's currently only after 26 weeks are men entitled to paternity leave. That's going to change from day one. Parental leave is going to change as well. This is currently unpaid and unused, but they're going to change that. And again, you had to have been there for 26 weeks. Bereavement leave is going to change to include all employees from day one, but if it's not about a child dying, then it's going to be 1 week paid. If it's about a child dying, that's 2 weeks paid. Okay. Flexible working. This was a big thing in their manifesto. It's not so big in the bill. They are still for flexible working. They had been talking about it being a default right. If somebody applied for it from day one, you had to give it to them unless you could really justify it. They've watered that down now to say, well, you just have to give really clear reasons, which we've had to do anyway. But it's actually in law now. Okay. Now, the ones that haven't been announced but were in the manifesto is the minimum wage. They were going to have one minimum wage for everybody over the age of 18. Obviously, we all know the infrastructure for that is in place. For every April, the minimum wage to go up. At the moment, if you have to do budget forecasting for next year, which I suppose some of you will have to do, we're working on it being £12.50 an hour. It will probably be less than that, but we couldn't say how much less. So, and we don't know definitely it's going to be next April. But if you have to put a budget in for personnel costs, 0 hours, use £12.50 as the amount that you're going to use for that budget. Okay. They were also talking about extending the time to start a tribunal from 4 months to 6 months. Again, that's not in the bill, but they could change that at any point. The right to disconnect, which I thought would be fantastic for golf clubs, because again, I still remember Gareth's session at conference about resilience. I'm like, if we could say to the chairman, no, you really, really can't send me an email at 11 o'clock and expect an answer, that would be fantastic. But they seem to have gone quite quiet on that right to disconnect. Yeah, it's a shame. Maybe it'll come out next year. And they're going to review all parental family leave to make sure it's supporting everybody as much as they want. Okay, so I'm going to do a bit pause there. I didn't know whether there are any questions so far.
Yes, we have one question from Mark. Do these weekly meetings need to be minuted or signed by both parties? So this question is about the probation process. Yes, the meeting should be noted, or even better, if you can record them. Always remember, if you're going to record a meeting, you need to inform employees that you are recording the meeting, and you need to provide them with a copy of the recording or a transcript of the recording, and they are also allowed to record the meeting. So yes, you want notes in some form of this meeting, and you should share that with the employee. So you could send a follow-up email after the meeting to say, this is what we discussed, here are the notes of the meeting. They do not have to be countersigned. As a matter of fact, no notes have to be countersigned. That doesn't mean they can't be challenged, but they don't have to be countersigned by an employee. However, obviously, if you have a recording, then you have a lot less dispute about what was said. So there we go. I hope that's helpful, Mark. We have a few more questions. Are there any indications of the dates these changes will come into place? I think Caroline will probably go through them shortly, but I can tell you nothing before sort of autumn next year.
Yeah, like I say, there is a chance there might be a change to minimum wage from April, but again, that's not confirmed at this stage. And the rest would be either October next year, 2025, or April 26. It's not going to be any further out than that. I think they realised that everybody being employers, were slightly freaked out by the amount of legislation improving workers' rights. I'm going to say the reason we have all these improvements is because of the employers who don't treat their employees well. That's it. It's always one, isn't it? It just feels like school again. There's just one of you has spoiled it for everybody else. So now we all have to follow these rules when actually we were doing fine beforehand. So it's just making sure that you've got these things in place and you're aware of them, so that it's not as much of a shock. And you need to start preparing your committees for these things as well, because it's difficult enough now with the amount of law we have now to get them to understand that I don't care what happened 30 years ago when you ran your business. This is what we have to do now. You need to start that training now so they understand where they are. Okay. Right. Okay. So let's go back onto that. Okay, so these are not yet announced. They may well be announced at the beginning of next year, because we are hurtling towards Christmas. I know, I'm sorry I mentioned the Christmas word, but it is the end of October. You've got the whole of November, and then what, maybe 2 weeks in December. We all know nothing gets done in December. So yeah, it's highly unlikely it's going to be announced this year. I could be wrong. It's like fairly, you'd say one thing one day and the next day the government contradicts you, so fine. So, but there are things that we do know dates for, and that is the sexual harassment law. So as of the 26th of October this week, you have to take all reasonable measures to prevent sexual harassment. Okay. Now, what the government has said they are definitely going to change, again, no date yet, is that they are going to add in third-party harassment. So if you were Nando's, it's not only the staff sexually harassing each other. God, that sounds like a very strange workplace. Staff sexually harassing each other. It's also their customers sexually harassing their staff. And I suppose the other way around, but it's less likely to be the other way around because staff know they can lose their jobs and customers just get silly, really. The problem with this is that golf clubs. Now, if you are a private member golf club, then your members could very strongly be argued to be part of the organisation, the same level as staff. So if your members harass your staff, that is a claim against you, the club. Okay, they are not third party. And if you are a limited company or an incorporated golf club, then your members are the third party and you are also liable for that. What this means is that for golf clubs, I'm going to say it feels a bit like they've gone, oh, golf clubs have got an opt-out here. They can pretend that the members are not part of the organisation, even though members obviously delight in telling us that they own the organisation. You have nowhere to go with this. You have to treat all allegations of sexual harassment incredibly seriously. I'm going to say no golf club ever has a problem dealing with staff to staff harassment. You all deal with it well, you follow the procedures, you take the appropriate action, that's fine. However, once a member is involved, and from the issue we had this week with one club, a member who's really good at golf, and so although he's been accused of sexual harassment and he's admitted it, even though he hasn't actually officially been sanctioned, it's still okay for him to represent the club playing in a county competition because, he's really good. And, he's sort of innocent until proven guilty, even though he said he is guilty and he's admitted it. But it's much more important that we win the county championship than we actually say this behaviour is inappropriate and don't treat our staff like this. So I'm going to say there's a lot of work to be done with committees. Me and the team, we're very happy to bang our heads against the brick walls to do this, aren't we, Nadia? Every week we are trying to educate the members to do this. You have to do this because the situation is that it's going to get very expensive. Okay, so we said before that the claim for discrimination, which is what sexual harassment would come under, is unlimited. Now it's unlimited plus 25%. I know that makes no sense, but it is. It's just going to get more and more expensive, let alone the reputational damage that you have. So you need to make sure that you are not only training your staff, and Kathy will put our email address in the chat again. You need to train them. We have online training so that they know what they're allowed to do or not allowed to do. They're not allowed to do in sexual harassment, but you should get your committee or board doing that training as well. And everybody who wants to be an officer of the club has to do that training. You should get them all to watch the BBC show about sexual harassment, which goes through and deals with the everyday statements that people make that we come across and then shows you what the reality of the situation is. Okay, they need to watch this. I think the BBC should be giving me commission because a number of times I've sent out that link, to be honest. But you need to get them to read that so that when there is an issue, and I'm going to say it is a when, they know how serious it is and they don't just go, oh, Gareth, he's a bit handsy, all right, okay, Caroline's a bit handsy. And actually we shouldn't be doing that. You need to be having a safe working environment. What was okay in the 70s, 80s, 90s, even possibly the noughties is no longer acceptable. And it's not a defense to say, oh, well, the world has changed and they haven't really quite kept up. They is always the men. The women have no problem keeping up with what's appropriate. The men seem to have a problem. I don't know why. They can use smartphones. That's new. They can use, any number of different things, Spotify, TikTok. So if they can use the software, they can probably learn to not touch stuff that's not theirs. They are also going to change, which is even more scary in a legal context. I know the word all does not seem scary to you, but it is very scary legally. You have to take all reasonable measures to prevent sexual harassment. all. That means not just what you think is reasonable, it means what any grown up, any adult, any judge thinks you should have done but didn't. So the example I just gave you, where the person had admitted they did it and apologized for it, even though they hadn't been officially sanctioned at the time of playing golf, the judge will say, you condoned his actions, even though you knew he was guilty, he'd admitted his guilt, you still let him do whatever he wanted to do, and go out and play and represent you. That is not preventing sexual harassment. Therefore, 25% uplift straight away. So just be aware that the priorities in a golf club might need to just be tweaked slightly, okay? Now, I've got a picture there of the Dallas Cowboy cheerleaders, because I was watching their documentary on Netflix, and they have lots of photo opportunities, and they have a no touch rule. So although they're having lots of photos taken with lots of people, there's no arms around anybody. The person in the middle is holding the football, the American football, yeah, and the girls are standing either side. There is no touching. If you touch, you're out. That's it. There is no, oh yes, but it was no, they're not interested. It's no touch out. Now, we did this on our weekly Zoom call last week, and we said it would be better to do a no touch policy, okay? To have it so it's really clear that the members are not allowed to touch staff. I'm going to say it's only ever a problem with touching female staff. There's very rarely male staff who get touched. Interesting that, but you should have a no touch policy. Okay, so then we had a few objections. So I thought we'd go through the objections together, because I thought they were so funny. It was so sweet. And you know how, caring I am at making your lives easier. So please do not touch. But I'm a hugger. So one of our golf clubs has a lady captain who's a hugger, and that's going to be a problem. It's like, sure, because nothing says hello like an invasion of personal space. Don't hug people. Just because you want to hug people does not mean they want to be hugged, and you do not get to decide what they want. The power relationship in a golf club is that members have more power in that relationship than the staff, because the staff know the member could be tricky. We all know tricky members, and insist on that person being removed. So that is not an equal relationship. If the members want to go and hug members, really don't care about that. They should not be hugging staff at all, okay? And it was interesting because one person then also said that they were a hugger and they hugged everybody, and it was wokeness gone mad. The world has gone woke mad. No, the world has finally woken up to the fact that certain people can't be trusted with anything that they touch and take liberties, and now we're taking action. So again, it's because certain people have abused that situation that we now have to do this. Had another one, you have to be able to shake somebody's hand when you meet them. I'm going to say shaking a hand is not usually sexual harassment, but it was about the no touch policy. It's like, okay, so the ancient art of handshake fortune telling. How is a strong handshake indicative of anything other than a strong handshake? Nothing at all. Honestly, why do you think con men are so successful? Because people say, oh, he's got a strong handshake, he must be trustworthy. And does this mean that I can't hold the door open for ladies? Again, not really sexual harassment. It's interesting what objections come out of the woodwork on these things. Okay, so it's very important in this person's life to hold the door open for ladies as a courtesy. We would prefer to have equal pay for equal work. If you could just put your efforts into that, that would be great. We'll cope with doing the door ourselves, okay? So just to go through some of those things. Slightly sarcastic, I know, but actually all of those, none of those are justifications for you deciding whether somebody else gets touched. You have no right to touch somebody else without their express permission. And actually, as a member, you can't get that express permission because, again, of the power imbalance in the relationship. So basically, don't touch. We had really good feedback from that session last week, where quite a few general managers got in touch and said, I don't understand why these other general managers didn't understand it. Just don't touch people, particularly not females. Why is that a problem? And of course, it's the ones who want to touch. Sorry, I am generalizing, but the ones who want to touch and are so indignant about it are the ones that are the problem. Okay, Oh, actually, I'll stop there because there might be a few questions about that one. No, are we all good? Yeah, so we've got the BBC sexual harassment. I would definitely watch that. That is fascinating. I'm going to say the whole team watched it, not together, separately. And we were screaming at the TV screen within 2 minutes, weren't we? We're like, it's just so obvious. But you follow it through and you go, oh, that's really good. And like I said, we can get you some training to get everybody trained. That's not a problem. Okay, so with something much less contentious now, which has already come into effect, is, you should be able to see that, is the tipping. The new rules on tipping, which came into effect on the 1st of October 2024, which obviously you all knew about, didn't you? And you've all applied without exception. Yeah, okay, well, let's see. So, right, now you have to pass all tips onto workers without any deductions other than income tax and national insurance. So if there is if there's a service charge, an admin charge, some places, and this is more private sector, I've done that. You can't do that anymore. You have to pass it all on to the employees. Okay. You have to distribute it in a fair and transparent manner. So you can't, I'm going to say, doing it on basis of seniority would not be as fair as doing it by the number of hours worked in a week/month. Okay, that would be a better way of doing it. You need to have a written policy that is available for everybody. Okay, you need to keep a record for up to 3 years of what you've paid to people and how that was worked out in case they ask to see it. And you have to pay all these tips by the end of the next calendar month. So if, for example, you have people putting extra on their subs for the tips for the year, then they would, and that was in April, you would have to pay that money out by the end of May to the staff. You cannot keep it until Christmas, okay? There might be a few questions on this. And if you have a trunk scheme, the same thing, you have to pay it out monthly. Now, if you have a trunk scheme and you're not sure, I'm going to say there are quite a few trunk schemes that are not actually trunk schemes. It would be worth having a conversation with us to discuss whether what you have in place actually complies with the new ruling. But even so, even if you have one that currently, well, not currently, complied before the 1st of October, you now have to pay out every month. Or, yeah, every month, the next calendar month after the tips are accrued. Okay. So that is quite a big one. We have Kathy is going to put something in the chat. So we have an overview for you. And we have a tips policy product for you as well, with everything you need to comply with the new law. Again, as always, the government has put a fine on this. If you do not do this, it's £5,000 per person who has not been paid correctly. So obviously it's not going to go straight to that. But if they bring a claim that the tips haven't been distributed fairly without deductions in the right time frame, that is a potential fine of £5,000 per person. So just be aware of that. Okay.
There's one more tricky thing with this, and that is that your agency staff also need to be paid tips, which if you're using agency staff, that's probably just made you, feel funny inside, because how are you going to manage that? So the tips need to be allocated per agency staff member, and you actually have to pay it to the agency, and the agency then has to manage payment to their employees. So that's one to look out for. It's a little bit of a difficult one with this process. And the other thing to remember is that staff members are entitled to these records. So they can ask at any time to see these records. So if a staff member asked to see the records, let us know, because there's a reason they want to see it. But also, you'll be unlikely to be able to say no or why, or bring a claim and then we'll deal with it. They actually have the right to request to see the records and the policy and all of it. So it has to be really transparent.
Yes, and the other thing is you can't just put the tips to the people who were on that event. Okay, that obviously we're talking about food and beverage now. So if somebody's booked an event and they've said, oh, here's £300 tip, that does not get distributed just via the staff. So again, this is about the fairness and the transparency. The reason somebody is having an event in the clubhouse is because the golf course is lovely, because the golf course is horrible. Nobody wants to be in that clubhouse, because the office has worked on making sure that all the admin side of things is done, that food has been ordered, because the catering team have done the lovely cooking, because the waiting staff have served delightfully. That is a team effort. It should be a team splitting of the tips. If you just put up on the, and this is a point, you have to now put it in writing and distribute it to all your staff. If you go, I'm going to say, I'd love somebody to try it. If you put in there that all tips that come into food and beverage are only going to be distributed to food and beverage who work on that day, let's see how many grievances we have from the Greens team, from the office team, from the catering team even, because that's not fair. Everybody is working together to make this a lovely place, and everybody should get a pro rata entitlement. What we usually say is the fairest way of doing it is the number of hours they work, okay? And that includes 0 hours staff have an entitlement based on the number of hours they've worked in that week, that month, okay? And we're doing it a month at a time, okay?
We have a question from Claire. Claire's asked a really good question, which is, if you have contract cleaners, are they included? Yes, they are. They are treated the same way as your agency staff, and we all know that generally would most of the time have the same contract cleaner come in. You know, if it's Joe that comes in, you know, every other night, it's usually Joe. It's rarely someone else, except if they change it to someone else. So yeah, they would be included in those tips.
Yeah. Good. Okay. So yeah, so there's a lot to sort out there. You need to get that sorted because, like I said, that's already in place. You're already being judged by how much you're complying with that. Oh yes, and the other one that came up actually, sorry, was that the club had been, I say it was something to do. So they gathered the tips as part of subs. Subs came in November. But some of it came in December because obviously not everybody does it when they're supposed to do it. So they were paying out the amounts they had got in November, in December, but they were paying it out tax-free. And then the amounts that they paid out in January were actually paid tax for December and January. And I'm like, no, you're not allowed to pay out staff tax-free in a week, in that month. If you're paying it out, which you have to do, because you've got it in November, you have to pay the tax and NI as you pay it out, not the next month for that month. That is illegal. The key is in the name, pay as you earn, not the month after you earned. That's not how it works. So if you've been doing that, paying out something tax-free and then making an adjustment the next month, I don't know who your accountants are. They should be shot. That is illegal. You are not allowed to do that. You have to pay the tax and the NI in the month that the money is paid out. That's it. It's really straightforward. I don't know why you would do anything else, because it's the same. It might be the same amount, it might be slightly less. The point is, it's not our decision. You pay it out when you pay the tax and NI when you pay it out. Okay. Oh, sorry.
Questions,
yeah,
if you don't mind.
Yes.
So we have some questions as to whether Greens should be included in a split of tips that was received in F&B. Short answer, yes. If you are not doing it, then you should have a very fair and reasonable reason as to why not. One doesn't jump to mind, I'm sorry. So actually, most of the time, absolutely yes. Same applies to if you have your F&B on a franchise, which a lot of you do. At the moment, that franchise might just take all the tips and deal with it internally for their staff. No, that tips now needs to be split across board. So you're going to need to work with the contractor, the franchise person, to work out how and who takes responsibility for ensuring that that is done properly across the business. And what if the department has no involvement in the function? Can this be written into a policy?
Yeah, again, sorry, I'd love to see how many grievances you get if you say, well, you're not getting any. It's like,
Yeah.
wow, that's like, what, 5 grievances straight away. Okay.
Yeah. So on paper, probably yes, but I can't see a clear, good enough reason right now to exclude certain people. So, for example, you might feel that the cleaner had no role to play in whether the function was delivered, but they ensured that it was clean enough and they maybe cleaned up afterwards. In your office, your salespeople would have been involved. And like Caroline said, if you didn't have nice greens and you didn't have, a nice looking garden and a tidy club, then they wouldn't be coming to you for the function in the first place. So keep in mind, it will be really hard to exclude someone from this. Yeah.
Okay.
So we have another one, someone who says they've gone back slightly. If a member of a private club experiences sexual harassment from a member of staff, is it the same rule in terms of showing all reasonable measures, and the club could be liable if the member is classed as staff, also member-to-member situations? Yes to all of it, I'm afraid.
Yes. Yeah, it's slightly easier if it's an employee doing the bad stuff, because that's really clear and easy to deal with under the ACAS guidelines. It's trickier to deal with a member of the golf club because that's dependent on your disciplinary policy, and you need to look at those now. I know England Golf has been really good at making sure people have got disciplinary policies in place. You now need to make sure they are fit for purpose, because you need to not be giving people 3 weeks to respond in writing to an accusation. That's just ridiculous amount of time. We need stuff to happen the same timelines as in the ACAS guidelines. Okay, so you need to be doing that. But everything you could be sued for in a golf club, you need to make sure that it stops happening. Yeah.
And then we have another question just about who to include and who not to include in tips. If you have a wake or a wedding in the clubhouse with no use of the course, do we should still share tips with greens? Again, nobody wants their wedding at a golf club that doesn't have nice, tidy greens and nice, tidy, pathway to walk down and drive into.
And doing the photos with that in the background. What we're trying to do now is reward the team for working together to make the golf club a lovely place. Okay. If you are using the tips because you don't pay your food and beverage people very well, that's a whole different issue, isn't it? Okay. So we should be rewarding the team for working together to make it a lovely place. And that means that everybody does think about how they can help each other. If you just give it to food and beverage, then the green people will get grumpy. Even if they don't raise a grievance, they will get grumpy, and their motivation to help another department is going to go downhill. So why do that when legally you're not supposed to be doing it anyway? Okay. And what do we got? Does it need to be an equal share? So the way that we're saying that would be a fair way of doing it is to allocate the tips based on the number of hours. Okay, so if it's me, Kathy, and Nadia, my maths is gonna fall down now, but I did 50 hours in the month, Nadia did 30 hours in the month, Kathy did 20 hours in the month. If we get £100, I would get £50 of that, Nadia gets £30, Kathy gets £20 based on the hours that we have worked. Okay, that's how we would do it. That is absolutely fair. Nobody can object to that. And I'm going to say there's lots of maths there, but you can work that out. That would be straightforward. And the aim of this is to comply with the law and avoid having people raising grievances every month. Just saying.
There's an interesting question, or a question with an interesting answer.
Yeah.
I'm frustrated. If the organizer of an event wants the tips to go only to the food and beverage staff, that how does that impact the distribution? So I'm always one to give you a little loophole because I like it. If he feels that strongly, he should give it in cash. Because actually,
she didn't say that. She didn't say that. Don't listen to her.
Say that. Please, this is going to be deleted from the recording. But actually, this rule does not apply to cash tips that is given directly to staff. Don't get me wrong. I think it will in the future because everyone else will also figure out that this is the loophole. But at this point, you do not have to apply this rule to cash tips that a client gives in an employee's hand, right? Not that they give you in cash that you then give employees in their hands, because no. The other rules apply. Yeah. But mainly it's that point at which you should really explain to the organizer of the event that so many other people in your team have played a part in making their event special, not just the people who were there until 1 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, and just being again slightly sarcastic, if the person is willing to sort of indemnify you for any £5,000 claim that you might have for breaking the law on this, absolutely do what they say. But it is the law. It's the law. It's not best practice. It is the law, and they are asking you to break the law. That is your decision, but just be aware it is breaking the law. Okay, and you've got the loophole that Nadia did not tell you about at all. Fine. Oh, and Barry, or it's a private birthday party. Wow, everybody's really upset about sharing tips out, aren't they? That's really quite impressive. Okay, it's not about whether they play golf. It is not about whether they play golf. It is about the fact that the golf club is a lovely place to be because you've got the greens there. It's a beautiful view. You've got the lovely trees. You've got the sunset going down. You've got a lovely clubhouse with lots of windows. It's clean. The food is fantastic. All of those things are key to somebody booking an event there. If you were on an industrial estate with the same clubhouse but no grounds, nobody would book with you. The course is key to why people book there. Okay, if you didn't have the course, they would not be booking their birthday party with you. They'd be down Nando's. Well, maybe not Nando's, but you know what I mean. You would be the same as Nando's. It's because of the course and the background and the space and the parking and everything that they're choosing, which is a team effort, not just food and beverage. And let's be clear, it's not even usually that they want the catering team to have it. They just want the serving staff to have it. And it's like, yeah, but the serving staff do a good job, but they're not key to the rest of it. Without the rest of it, the serving staff wouldn't have anything to do. So it really is about all staff. And that does mean, correctly, that the amount of tips people get will go down. But if everybody's working together to get events in and they understand, I, as the greenkeeper, I'm going to get, I don't know, £5 from this event, why not try and say to my brother-in-law, oh, why don't you have your birthday at our club? Whereas if I'm not getting £5, what's my justification? It's not sort of proper commission, but we're working together to attract events. And the best way to do that is to reward the team and not to put them into silos. That's the thing.
Paul's asked a really good question, which I will all ask you to read. It's long and it'll take me forever to read it out. But Paul, unfortunately, in that situation, I think you're right. I think that if you have 3 0-hour servers who are working 3 events, every summer, and there is a big tip for a big function, they may actually get less than the barman who works 4 nights a week. I'm afraid that your maths might work out that way, which does seem quite unfair. I agree.
Well, yeah, to your point, because the thing we have to remember is the staff in food and beverage, waiting staff, are being paid. They're not doing it free of charge and they're living from the tips. So why should they get their wage? Sorry, I'm not against, I'm very much for higher minimum wage, absolutely. But they're being paid their hourly wage, as are the office staff, as are kitchens, as are greens, and a tip is a cherry on top. So they're being paid extra for doing what they're being paid for to do anyway, because they are specifically hired to do the waiting. It's not even that they came in to do some photocopying and were asked to do some waiting. They were supposed to be there and they're paid to do the waiting, and there is a tip on top of it. Yes, so they will get less, but if that was key, again, that seems to be key in some golf clubs to topping it up to a reasonable level. So everybody's on minimum wage and then you get the tips. Well, that doesn't seem fair nowadays. Just doesn't. It seems might be legal, but it doesn't seem ethical. And if you really feel that strongly about your waiting staff getting a decent wage, then you should pay them a decent wage, and then the tips are shared between the whole team. Yeah.
Yeah. And remember, the whole idea here is about applying some sort of fair criteria to giving out the tips. So although if you look at these 3 people that you've described in isolation, then it might look a little unfair to them. But actually, when you look at the overall, the overall split of it, it might mean that they would sometimes get a nice tip when they weren't working. Yeah. So because they've worked 8 hours and they'll get 8 hours worth of tips, but that some of that tip that they might get might not be coming from the 8 hours that they work. So it will work out. And it's still the most fair way to do it.
Okay, again, I find it fascinating how strongly people feel on this. You cannot ask somebody to opt out of this legislation. It's like saying, can I ask them to opt out of paying tax? No, it is a legal requirement. No, the staff can't opt out. No, and you can't ask them. Again, if they raised that you had asked them to opt out, you've got your £5,000 fine per person. It is a legal requirement. Okay, you might not like it. There are lots of legal things that we don't like. None of us like paying income tax, but you've still got to do it. And so you might want to think about how you structure tips going forward. For example, some golf clubs don't let their members give tips. It is once a year, a bulk amount, £100, £150. It comes across with the subs. That's a lot easier to deal with. It's once a year, done. And then you've only got occasional societies. And you can then say to the societies, actually, we don't allow cash tips or anything. I appreciate we still got that loophole there, but we are adding an extra £150 on because of the tips. And that will be distributed towards everybody who was involved in that night's event. And they'll go, oh, that's great. Everything's sorted. We need to approach it from the side of this has to work, not how can I get out of it? Okay, it has to work. There are ways to make it work. It's not tragic. Yes, for maybe a short couple of months, the food and beverage might be a little bit out of pocket, but everybody else will be in a much better mood because they're getting stuff. And you have to do it anyway. So let's work together. If you've got any major problems, and I don't mean another maths question, Paul, I'd rather not have another maths question, thank you very much. But if you want to talk it through, contact us on the details you had, okay? And then we can talk through what's going to be viable for you. But you have to approach it from how can I make this work, not how can I get out of it, because you can't get out of it, okay? Right, so that's the end of today. Just to clarify, as always, that employment law is not golf. You don't get a gimme if you're nearly there, and you don't get a mulligan if you're like, oh, let me hit that again. If you do it wrong, you end up in tribunal. It gets expensive, legal fees, awards, everything. So just check with your retained HR advisor before you do anything, not after, before you do anything, so that you are covered, so that you don't have to worry about that with everything else you're worrying about. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Caroline. I'd just like to thank Caroline, Kathy, and Nadia for this afternoon, and Natalie working away in the background,
Yeah.
changing our settings throughout today's webinar. So a big thanks to everybody. This is the first webinar now of the winter, so please keep your eye out for future webinars that will be coming up. And we very much look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you very much.